Welcome to the From My Stand podcast with Matt Hinkle. Whether you are an avid hunter, a novice, or someone interested in the sport, Matt has a unique perspective to share. Sit back, relax, and kick your boots up as Matt shares what he's seeing from his stand.
Hi friends, welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Matt Hinkle. Thanks for joining us. Well, this is our third episode in a brand new podcast called From My Stand. It's primarily an outdoorsman's podcast. And I told you in episode 1 that the first 5 episodes are going to be about my personal philosophy of hunting. And my philosophy is built on 5 words. In episode 1, we talked about what's your goal? What's your goal? That's where everything starts. What is it in your hunting that you're trying to accomplish? Episode 2, we talked about your ground. Where are you going to be hunting, and does your ground support your goal? So we talked about that. Today, we're going to talk about the third word in my philosophy of hunting, and that is the word game plan. Game plan. So when I approach hunting, number 1, I ask myself, what am I trying to accomplish this season? Number 2, where am I going to be hunting? And can the ground I'm hunting on support my goal? The third consideration, the third thing that you've got to look at when you're planning for the fall or whatever it is that you're doing, what is my game plan going to be? What's my strategy? What's my approach going to be? Now, there are lots of different hunting strategies. Years ago, I read a book called The Big Game Hunter's Bible by Jim Zumbo. I recommend that book to hunters if you haven't read it. I read it probably 20 years ago, and since then I've reread it numerous times. Jim Zumbo is one of my heroes. He's one of the hunters I look up to in the business, and really think highly about him. And that book is excellent. Well, in that book, he talks about common big game hunting strategies. He talks about things like spotting and stalking, baiting, tracking, still hunting, stand hunting, just all the main line hunting strategies that we use every fall. Well, this episode is not going to be big enough to cover all game plans and all strategies. So I'm just going to kind of keep it personal. Let's talk about whitetail hunting here in Ohio. But of course, principles that we're talking about are, the specifics we're talking about kind of deal with whitetail deer in the Midwest. But the principles we're dealing with, they're somewhat timeless and universal. So take what you're hearing today and just apply it into your own situation, okay? Hit me up in the comments if you have any, if I missed something or you have a thought or a suggestion, or if you would like to see a different type of hunting strategy talked about in a future podcast, just let me know. But let's just kind of keep it to what I'm used to, which is whitetail deer here in Ohio in the Midwest, okay? Let's just take a hypothetical goal for just a moment, okay? Let's say that your goal is you want to kill a full-grown whitetail buck this year. You're not necessarily looking for a button buck. You want something, let's just say like a mainframe 8 out to the tips of his ears, just a normal, classic American whitetail deer 8-pointer, or if you're from the West, a 4x4, okay? Or I guess a 3x3, a 3-pointer with eye guards. That's how you guys would say it out West, I think. If I got that wrong, let me know in the comments, okay? But just that standard 8-point buck, all right? You got your ground covered, okay? You know where you're going to be hunting. Maybe you're going to be hunting some public land or the family farm, or you secured permission somewhere, or you're on a lease, whatever the deal is. But goal, check, you got that. Ground, check, you got your ground. Now, the next thing you need to think about is, what's my game plan going to be? What am I going to do on that ground this fall? When the time gets here, what's my strategy going to be? All right. What I normally do, what most hunters like me in this part of the country do, is we do something called stand hunting. Stand hunting. Stand hunting has several crucial elements. Let me just talk about each of them for just a few minutes, because this would all be a part of your game plan and be a part of your strategy. It all starts, first of all, with scouting the area. Now, I've already teased this in last episode, and I'm going to say it again today in this episode. We are going to have either an episode or a series of episodes on scouting, because scouting is king in whitetail deer hunting and in stand hunting. You've got to learn how to scout. I heard somebody say one time, and I fully agree with this, if you spend more time scouting than you do hunting, you'll always get deer. And there's some truth to that. Scouting is very important. Scouting is just going into the area when you're not hunting and trying to figure out what the deer are up to. How do they live? Because you're trying to figure out how to be somewhere where they're going to be before they show up. That's the name of the game in stand hunting. Stand hunting is all about figuring out where that deer is going to be and you being there first. Okay. So it all starts with scouting. Then after that, there's a fly flying around. Try not to let that distract you. I don't know if I'll be able to get rid of them or not. But so you scout. It starts with scouting. After you've scouted and you're pretty sure that you got a handle on what the deer are up to, the next thing you're going to do is select the spot that you're going to be hunting. Select the spot. Now, in that spot, maybe you're going to put a ground blind. Maybe you're going to make a natural ground blind, or you're going to go buy a manufactured one and use that. There's a lot of good ones out there on the market. Maybe you're going to hang a tree stand in a tree. And if you're going to do that, you need to pick out that tree. What's going to be my tree this year for my stand? But after you've scouted, you get the spot picked out. The next thing that you're going to want to consider, and by the way, back to selection of the spot, you need to think about things like wind direction. You always want to hunt downwind of your game, not upwind. Make sure that the wind is going from the animal to you and not from you to the animal, or they'll just wind you and it won't work. So you got to kind of plan that spot out very meticulously. And then just as meticulous as you are in figuring out what tree you're going to hunt out of or where on the ground you're going to put that ground blind, you need to be meticulous in what's your approach going to be. You might hunt downwind of the animal like you're supposed to, but if you walk in and you're coming in with the wind direction wrong, you're just going to blow all those deer out of there before you get there. Another thing to think about is, is this going to be an evening stand or a morning stand? Deer primarily, now I know, and if you disagree with this, certainly you feel free to put it in the comments, but and we can talk about it. But deer primarily feed at night. They move into their feeding areas in the evenings, and then they're coming out of those feeding areas in the morning. So things you're going to have to think about is like, if you're hunting around here, acorns are king. That's one of the things. If you want to hunt a feeding area in Ohio, find acorns, because deer will be feeding on the acorns if you find acorns on the ground. But you got to be real careful hunting acorns. A lot of people think, well, there's a bunch of acorns on the ground, so I'll just throw a stand up here. And then you go walking into that stand a half hour before daylight, and you didn't think about the fact that the deer are already there. See, that's the kind of planning, your game plan. You gotta think about things like that. If you're going to put a stand up right where the acorns are, that's fine. That's okay. I've done that before, but that needs to be an evening stand. If it's going to be a morning stand, you need to back out of that feeding area maybe just a little bit and try to get between where they feed and where they bed, because in the morning, that's where you're going to catch them. You're going to kind of catch them en route. See, hunting is as much mental as it is physical. I mean, yes, you need to be able to shoot a bow or a gun. Yes, you need to be able to sit still for a long period of time. Yeah, you need to be able to do those physical things. But man, hunting is a mental game. It is mental, and you're going to have to think about what your game plan is going to be. And I would encourage you, I'll just be honest, I write a lot of stuff down. I know not everybody does this, but I've got an example of it, a notebook just like this, a notebook and pencil, And I mean, in the off season, when you're scouting or when you go into a new area, write things down that you see when you're out there scouting. And no detail is too small. Just like a coach of a football team or a basketball team, in order to prepare their team for next week's game, they're paying attention to every single detail that they can to make sure that they're ready for that game. Well, hunters can do the same thing. I mean, we get down to every single detail, and that promotes success. That's going to add to your success in the fall. So think about, scout, then select that spot, but even think about what it's going to be like when you go in and how you approach that stand, because there's always more than one way to get to a stand. Try to figure out what the best way to get to that stand is going to be. I'll tell you another thing, guys, and maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I think this stuff matters. You need to think about when you get to that stand, especially the first time. Now, as a hunting season wears on, hunting season's a marathon. A lot of times you don't go out day one and get something. It takes going back and going back and going back and going back. And you really get better the more times you do it. But if you don't do a good job that first time, you can really mess an area up. And so before I ever even go to my stand for the first time, I'm trying to think about everything. I'm looking at everything that's in my backpack. I'm thinking about everything that's going to be in my hands, because you need to get to that stand with minimal noise, minimal disturbance. You don't want to get to a stand the first morning and you're there in the dark and you got all this stuff in your hands, you got all this stuff in your backpack, and you didn't think about it ahead of time, and all of a sudden you're making noise in the dark on day one. I mean, man, big bucks don't get big because they're stupid. They are smart, and they're going to figure out, they're going to get onto you. We like to talk about patterning big bucks, and I'm all for that, but big bucks try to pattern us. And so, man, come up with your game plan. Have it thought through. And then the last thing about game plan is just execution. It just all comes down to execution and being at your absolute best every time you go into the woods. For me personally, I try to set a high standard of excellence for myself in hunting, which means that I know it's a hobby. I realize that it's not how I make my living, but I still want to set that standard of excellence. Every time I go into the woods, I expect good things to happen. I expect to succeed. And a lot of that comes into having your game plan figured out ahead of time and then going out there and executing it. And then I'm going to leave you with this, and it's going to seem like contradictory advice, but this is just something to think about. First of all, don't quit on your game plan too soon. Don't quit on your game plan too soon. I know, guys, that not every hunt goes the way you expected, and hunting can be a very discouraging proposition. I was thinking about something the other day. I thought to myself, during the course of a several month-long hunting season, really more goes wrong than goes right. I mean, think about it. A lot of things go wrong in a hunting season, but it only has to go right once. Okay. And that's the day we're always looking for. We're always trying to get to. So when things don't go wrong, don't just bail out totally and give up on everything. Okay. Good things happen to people that persist and stick with it. Don't quit just because it didn't work on day one. But also here's what might sound like contradictory advice. And you're just going to kind of have to take this advice or leave it, but take it or leave it. But if you take it, you'll just have to fit it into your own situation. But also you may have to make a halftime adjustment. I've had seasons where my game plan just wasn't working. What I thought was going to work wasn't. Don't be afraid to move that stand. Don't be afraid to change your approach, because sometimes game plans have to, you have to have that halftime adjustment. Don't be afraid to do that either. Okay. Again, it's your hunting season. Make it your own. Well, let me give you a little sneak peek into what we're going to be talking about next time. So we've talked about goal, ground, game plan. If you were a new hunter, you would think, when are we going to talk about gear? A lot of times guys will get into hunting and the first thing they do is go to a sporting goods store and buy a bunch of gear. I always say gear is your fourth consideration. It's not what you go out and do day one. First, your goal. Second, your ground. Third, your game plan. Next week, we're going to start talking about gear. Okay. We're going to have an episode on gear. What do I need to get to help me accomplish my goals? So we're going to get to, we won't film from a sporting goods store, but we're going to go to the sporting goods store next week and talk about what gear you need. Hey guys, I hope your hunting season is pure joy and nothing but success this fall. I hope you have a great time and I hope you're safe out there. If I missed something in today's episode or something you want to talk about in a future episode, hit me up in the comments. I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. But it's been a joy to be with you today. I'm your host, Matt Hinkle, and that's how I see it from my stand. God bless you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to tell your buddies and follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Y'all take care.